Hi everybody, this is Chris Johnson again. We're going to be going over the question, is there evidence for a creator? This is going to be the first of a series of videos I'm going to do, just asking simple questions, and we're going to go through explaining them. Now the only thing I ask that you do on these videos, even if you don't believe like I believe, that's certainly fine. And I know there's going to be atheists watching these things. If you don't believe like I believe, perfectly fine. But there's no harm in just stopping to listen and to think about what's being said. So now I'm going to make a statement here first about is there evidence for a creator, and typically the first answer I give. What I'm going to have a lot of atheists do is simply pause the video right after here and never go back and listen to the rest of it. They're just going to pick apart the first thing I say without listening to the whole explanation. So for the rest of you who want to listen to the whole thing, think carefully about this. The evidence of creation comes from the absolute impossibility of the contrary. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, we're going to get into the details of this, but whether it's Allah or Jehovah or Buddha or whatever flavor you want to give for the creator, I'm just stating that these are the grounds for a creator. Whichever one it is, that's a whole different set of arguments, and we're going to cover those eventually. I will get into those. But for now, we're just going to say, is there a God? Is there a creator? So, the definition of evidence. Evidence is that which tends to prove or disprove something, ground for belief or proof. Okay, so let's think about this logically. Let's say you're walking through the forest, okay? As you're in the middle of the forest and you come upon a tree that has a painting. There's a painting, it's framed, it has little strings on it, it's nailed in at the top, and it's hanging on the tree. The first thought that comes through your mind, is it one of two things? One, is it, wow, look what evolved from this tree over millions of years? Or two, is it, where's the painter that painted this thing? Or who hung this up here? That it was placed there, that it was designed by some purpose. The logical conclusion of that, and I've even had atheists admit this before, evolutionists admit this, that it's logical to conclude a designer from design. Yet they'll still turn around and try to believe in evolution anyway, but it's still logical to conclude a designer from design. Bill Gates said in the book The Road Ahead, he said human DNA is like a computer program but far, far more advanced than any software ever created. He's absolutely correct. I think that's an understatement. DNA, as far as we are aware, is the most complex molecule known to us in the universe. We are nowhere close even beginning to understand the DNA and its complexity. So when you see complexity in nature like this, and anybody who wants to read more on this topic, if you want a great book, you should get Michael Behe's book, Darwin's Black Box, and read The Biochemical Challenge to Evolution, because as we have gotten more down to a micro level, seeing things in a microscopic level, the more complex they become. Every time we find something we think is simple, once we see it closer, we find there is more complexity than we can possibly imagine. And it has the imprint of design all over it. So the Bible says in Romans 1:20, "For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. There is no excuse for anyone not to be able to see the Creator in the creation." Okay? Now, a lot of people get confused over, because a lot of people, what they're trying to do, especially the atheists, try to bring God, the all-powerful God, down to man's little placid level of thinking. And that's the wrong way to approach it. Let's take the cell phone, for example. This cell phone inside has light board, it has circuitry and printed circuitry, a lot of electronics in here, it's got a camera on it. I had asked an atheist one time. I sat down with her, and her and I were talking. I said, "Do you believe in evolution?" She said, "Yes." Of course, she's an atheist. They believe in evolution. So I pulled out my cell phone, and I said, "Would you consider this a complex mechanism?" Now, she was a little skeptical, like I was trying to lead her on and trap her. I just wanted her opinion. I said, "You don't have to be afraid. Just in your opinion, do you consider this a complex mechanism?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, now given millions, billions, trillions of years, how much time you want," I said, "could this produce itself out of the mud on its own?" She said, "Yes." Now, oftentimes when I say this, I get a lot of people that are shocked, like, she would say something like that? Well, but that's what they really believe. I just remember putting it away, and I said, well, you've got a heck of a lot more faith than I do, because I just don't have enough faith to believe that. I will never forget the look on her face. It was like a calf looking at a new gate, or, a cow on an oncoming train, just like, I had never thought of that before. She didn't want to talk about it anymore after that, of course. But the point is that upon bare logical presentation of the mind, it's it's impossible for anything else to be true but there be a designer to a design. Okay? So just like I have never met or seen the person who makes this Motorola cell phone, okay? But I believe he exists because I see the design, okay? And, a lot of the evolutionists and atheists, it cracks me up so much. They said, well, why can't we see God? Well, if I open up this cell phone, I can't see the designer inside this thing. He's not in there running all the little mechanisms. He's outside of the design. He is more powerful than the design he made. And God created time, space, and matter. He is outside of time, space, and matter. He is unaffected by them. He can travel through them at will. So, to expect the designer to be inside the design is a little ridiculous. Of course, I've read many atheists and evolutionists who say that there's nothing outside of time, space, and matter. How do you know that? Have you been outside there to know that? A lot of times, it's so amazing to me, I guess, and I know this doesn't happen with all atheists and all evolutionists, but I mean an awful lot of them that just think they already know everything. And so I'll ask them, I said, do you know everything? And of course they say, no, I don't know everything. I say, well, do you even know half of everything? And they say, no, not even close. I said, well, let's just say you know half of everything. Is it possible that God exists in the other half that you don't know about? And you see the look on their face, it's like a new thought rattles around their brain and gets lost somewhere. Very interesting. But let's check out something from, I wanted to make a note here of, by a man named René Descartes. I believe his name is Descartes. He's a very famous 17th century philosopher. He's called the father of modern philosophy. And a reason I wanted to bring him up, because it's very interesting that he, just from rational thought, just from thinking about it, discovered God. Now, a lot of atheists might find that surprising because they've never heard that René Descartes did this. Well, that's because it's oftentimes covered up. I could show you even from, people, don't go to Wikipedia. The only time I go to Wikipedia for information, for example, I'm just using this as an example, is for a biased atheist or evolutionist worldview, like a humanist perspective. When I'm looking for that, I go to Wikipedia to find information because it's filled with biased information. And there's examples I could give of René Descartes. If anybody requests those of me, I'll give it, showing how what Wikipedia actually does. There's a whole lot of corruption that goes through Wikipedia too, but we don't have time to cover that today. Nonetheless, going in there, they try to make René Descartes seem like he was an atheist philosopher, that you didn't need God to rationalize things. But they always quote from his first discipline on things, which, René Descartes is famous for, I think, therefore I am. Okay? Most everybody has heard that phrase. And what they end up doing is that many atheists will quote from his beginning premise and then go to some modern philosopher for their conclusion, instead of going to René Descartes for the conclusion that he came to. He spent an awful lot of time on this, okay? Now here's some quotes from René Descartes on his Principles of Philosophy. Okay, and I'll put the reference to it on the screen for you. He said, "The mere fact that I exist and have within me an idea of a most perfect being provides a very clear proof that God indeed exists. The only remains for me to examine how I received this idea from God." It only remains for me to examine how I received this idea from God. "For I did not acquire it from the senses, and it was not invented by me either. The only remaining alternative is that it is innate in me, just as the idea of myself is innate in me."